Welcome to Pistons Jack Chats, where I'll have a guest from the Pistons and NBA community join me each week to discuss your Detroit Pistons. Before we get started, if you haven't already, I'd be super grateful if you could like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. That just helps the channel keep growing. But let's get to it. I've got a very special guest joining me today. You're probably all familiar with him, at least if you're on Twitter, you definitely are. Got Jordan here from Pistons Thoughts. What's going on, my man?
What's up, Jack? Thanks for having me.
So we may as well just get straight into it because the first place I want to hit is just an overall vibe check on the 10 and 15 Detroit Pistons. Last time I checked, they currently sit 11th in the East. They were tied for wins with the 8th seed. They have gone 3-7 in their last 10 games, but overall, it feels like this season is still ahead of where most of us probably predicted. How are you just feeling overall?
I feel good about it. I think a lot of us might have gotten fooled by that stretch of games where everything was within a possession or two. This was always, and we don't like to hear this, but this was always gonna, still be a growth season, and no one was really expecting wins coming out the gate. So I'm happy at 10 and 15. I'm not over the moon about it, but I think it's very clear, especially Cade is that guy. We know that now, 100% without a doubt. Trajan Langdon, all his moves have worked out so far. And last season we were 2-23 at this point, 25 games into the season. And I know that
I'm sorry to cut you off. It's actually, when you just said that there, I'm like, that is insane. But sorry,
it invokes a visceral reaction. It's crazy that we sat through that last year. But so even though the bar was through the basement, it's to be at 10 and 15. Obviously, it's an improvement, but I think above all else, they've been playing pretty sustainable basketball with some still pretty glaring flaws and holes. So I think that's what's most exciting is there's still very clear things and positions they need to upgrade on the team, but they're still finding ways to win games. It's been a tough early schedule, and it's getting tougher again. But I think to be sitting at 10 and 15 with realistically, you could argue some of the close losses or some of the close wins could be close losses, but arguably 2 or 3 more wins should be on their record.
Definitely. I love how you bring up we're seeing a lot of the holes in this roster because I actually think that's a good thing. It is painful to watch in the moment. I'm going to get to each player here and get you to give me some grades shortly, but to see these young players in particular, see them their areas of improvement or their warts of their game really showing, it is painful, but it's such a good thing to bring up because it's kind of what we should have seen last season. But last season, it felt like the whole thing was just a massive black hole. There's Cade.
Well put. Yep.
And then it was just this massive black hole of darkness. Whereas this season, it's you're seeing the growth, but you're also seeing where this roster needs to be tweaked and, things need to change. So
100%. Yeah. And that's the most promising part for me is they're still at a decent record, all things considered, with some pretty clear holes that should be pretty fixable, whether that's through internal development or trades and free agency and whatnot.
Absolutely. And I have to ask you, just because this is about vibes, this little topic here. Is this the most you have seen a Pistons team rally around each other, smile, laugh?
100%.
When was the last time? You've been doing this for a minute now.
I think 2015, 2016. Yeah. Obviously the Blake year, his superstar year was a great year. It was great with him. But the team, this feels different. It feels more like the 15-16 run that obviously only lasted a year. With that playoff run. But in terms of Malik Beasley, I'm sure we'll talk about him. He seems like the guy who has come in with experience as the vet, still contributing on the floor, and just is just exuding vibes. And everybody, seems to love playing with each other, and for JB as well.
I love it. I couldn't agree more. And Malik is when you think of the word vibe, like not just the Pistons, he is
He's
the
been
vibe.
so fun. Yeah.
All caps. Like
Truly.
He's been awesome. Let's do some grades so far. So we're 25 games in. We're over the quarter mark of the season. We've got a real sample size now. Like I think 20 to 25 games is where you start to see like the standings. I know they're really clustered in the East, but you start to kind of find out what this team is and the teams around them. So I'm just gonna dish you a name of a player and a coach at some point. I just want you to give me a grade and
sure.
Yeah, we'll talk about each player. So I'm going to start with Cade Cunningham.
Let's do it.
Averaging career highs across the board, like literally everywhere but free throw shooting. Like
yeah, which is weird.
Crazy. It's crazy. He's averaging 24 points, 7 boards, 9 assists, 45% from the field, 39% from three, 38% on pull-up threes. Like
love it.
5 triple doubles, 11 double doubles. Like it's the Pistons, I think, are 8 and 12 with him in the lineup. Talk to me about Cade Cunningham and dish me a grade.
I will say A. The plus is reserved for situational late game turnovers. That just will come with time. I mean, every high usage player has that issue, but I mean, he's been unbelievable. I mean, he's clearly emerged as that guy. I mean, we'll see. Well, depending on the record, I think he's a no-brainer all-star, assuming they stay in this range. No, he's just in complete control of the games a lot of the time. I think the first maybe couple weeks of the season, he's given you a really good half of basketball and then sort of fades, whereas he's started to really, come into form and give you full games. I think it's been unreal.
Absolutely. And I was going to get to, do you think he's an all-star? But you seem pretty adamant he is.
He should be.
Yeah.
And I understand that with all-star comes team record. That's a factor. I get it. I don't even disagree with it. Assuming they keep this trajectory, I think you can't keep him off the team.
So if as long as they're hovering around play-in contention, 10th seed, or if they're 11th, they're close to the 10th, like they are kind of now.
Right.
I think I'm with you. I think what we've seen from him, I love that you bring up, like, because early in the season, like, he would have excellent half and then kind of fade a little bit. But I think we're really starting to get that 4-quarter performance from him.
For sure.
We didn't really touch on it, but defensively, like, he's not perfect, but considering his usage on offense, what we've seen from him defensively is also something I think should be factored into the conversation
for sure
with him as an all-star. Like you look at the people he's competing with, like Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, like immensely talented players. And, Brunson and Mitchell in particular are obviously better than Cade at this stage of their career, but I don't think they bring what Cade has built defensively. So
I mean, he has the tool, and he's shown it this year more than he has in the past. Like, he definitely has the physical tools to be a pretty solid defensive wing, essentially. And I think he's shown that. Like, the effort's been there most nights. And it's one of those things too, and I'm sure we'll get to this, but like, he probably looks even better on that end of the floor if you have a better rim protecting big, and also add in maybe another shot creator offensively, that sort of thing. But I think, he's been great both ends of the floor. No notes other than turnovers.
I agree. I think if I had to give it a grade, it's an A. Like, the turnovers is honestly, some of the late game scoring earlier in the season, but I think like he's really taken a jump this season.
Yeah, and I think part of the early stuff could also be attributed to, again, another new coach, new system, new players coming in, not to make excuses, but like that takes some time to adjust to. Like, I know we're all impatient, and I am myself, but I think that sort of adds up for, why it might have taken a few weeks or, a month plus to really come into form.
Totally. No, he's been far and away. There's been plenty of positives, but I think for Pistons fans, seeing him take another step, because last year he was really good. Like, I know that the season was a disaster, but I'll be honest, man, like, what I'm seeing from Cade this year is got me feeling a lot higher about him than I did at the end of last season, just honestly.
I agree.
And
No, I'm
maybe
with you.
I was looking at him. I think as crazy as it sounds, I probably didn't factor in enough just how poor the roster was around him last season.
Yep.
At times, I thought maybe that was a bit of an excuse, but I think I was wrong to think that.
I
Because
think you were wrong too. That roster was insane.
yeah,
That
no,
was
and like I
crazy.
knew it was bad, but just
Yeah.
seeing him with shooting around him now
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
some decent coaching, I think it's got me feeling a lot better about the Pistons long term with Cade. I was never fully out. It was just
For
this
sure.
season's been so encouraging.
I mean, no, I agree. I mean, I knew the roster was. I mean, you knew it too, but I knew that was a valid excuse last year. But it's still like you needed to see it. You know, you can give all the excuses, the valid excuses in the world, but you still need to see it, and he's shown it this year, unquestioned.
Absolutely. Before we move on here, any other final thoughts on Cade? Because I know everyone listening or watching is, Cade's the guy. So I just want to get everything of Cade out
Yeah,
now.
I mean, I think that's it. I mean, if the Pistons had to trade every player on their roster except Cade, you would still feel good. I mean, not to say that they don't have other great pieces, but like you'd be like, sure, like we have our superstar, like cool, let's build a team around him. We're good. And I think yeah, he's shown it. I mean, knock on wood, he's been durable this season. Um it's just I'm excited to see the roster continue to improve around him.
I agree. I'll ask you last question on Cade. What is the one part of his game you want to see improve the most that you think will take this team a step further?
I think turnovers is probably the obvious one. I think, and I don't really fully know what he can do with this next thing I'm gonna say, but drawing fouls. I know like part of it is, it's an art form, as we've learned from the Hardens and Trey Youngs of the world. But obviously, the way he's officiated is a little different than other players of his caliber. But I think if he can get to the line more, if he can just find a way, whether it's bribing the officials, whether it's talking to Adam Silver, whatever it is. But no, I think if he can find a way to get to the line more, get an extra 3-4 points a game for free, I think that helps.
I agree. I like that you brought that up because the turnovers is the obvious one, but I
Right.
do truly think for him to continue to elevate as a player, it's scoring more efficiently in the paint. So whether that's getting
Yeah.
to the free throw line more or
Yep.
it's continuing to improve as a finisher.
Definitely.
But the turnovers, yes, but I think being such a high usage guy, like they're
And
gonna
the
be
turnovers have, improved a bit.
they have,
And
yeah.
as we hoped and kind of knew they would. But yeah, I mean, again, it's just look at every high usage player in the league. They're
Yeah,
averaging 3-4 turnovers a game.
absolutely. And it's not like he's only dishing out 5.5 assists. Like he
Right.
I feel like he's dishing like 9 assists per game feels low. Like
This is and
for what we've watched.
I had a feeling, I think a lot of people did have a feeling that his assist number would go up with better spacing around him. And it's just like, it's so nice to see that we were all right with that. And we have a GM who agreed and actually did it. And now we're seeing it. Yeah. Like he can be an 11 assist guy. I mean, I think in his career, as long as, the roster around him is good, I think he's going to have multiple 10 plus assist seasons or at least close to it.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on. All right, Cade. Cade gets an A.
Yep.
Moving on now to Cade's running mate in the backcourt,
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Ivey. This season, he's giving you this surprised me a little bit. It was a bit higher than I thought, but similar to Cade, all career highs across the board in major stat categories. 18 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. That's rounded up. 45% from the field, still shooting 38% from three.
Yep.
Excellent preseason in first 10 to 15 games. I think he's struggled the past 10 games. Had a couple
Agreed.
of really good games sandwiched in there, but for the most part, it's probably been trending a little bit down.
Yeah.
Those numbers, though, are still higher than I thought. And the three
Yeah.
ball, it's still at 38%, hit 2 huge threes against the Knicks the other night after really struggling. What are you seeing from Jaden Ivey? And yeah, just a grade on him so far.
A grade, honestly, I would lean B plus. Like you said, lately, the biggest issue for him, I think, has been inconsistency so far in his career. The three ball being what it is still, I mean, it looks better. Um, I'm no, shot mechanic, nerd, but like it looks cleaner, it looks better. Like when he shoots it, it looks consistent. I'm like, I think it's going in. More so than last year where I'm like, we'll see. Um, but I think he's been really solid. Again, the consistency is sort of an issue, but like he had, yeah, like you said, first 10, 15 games it was unbelievable. Like if we graded him there, it'd be an A plus. Whereas the last 10 or so sort of bring him down to a B plus. But like we've learned this season, and maybe, Monty tainted our judgment last year, but Cade and Jaden Ivey can be the backcourt of the future, and they can work together. And I love seeing them staggered. I love how they are utilized when they're on the floor together. Him hitting shots is massive. Yeah, I mean he's been really, really good at times.
Definitely. And I agree. I think the thing with Jaden is you want to see him continue to improve more as a scorer, and that meant but I think it's the consistency.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and consistently, like, instead of it just being 2 out of 5 to 6 games where you get that efficient 20 points, few assists, low
right.
turnovers, it's 4 out of 6 games. I
Yep.
think that's the next step for him because, like, I think with Jaden, when we zoom out a bit, like, as long as he keeps hitting threes like this
Yeah.
and can continue to improve defensively, you can play him next to Cade and extend him, and he can be a part of the core. He doesn't have to be the leading scorer. He doesn't have to be the second leading scorer. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, from what I'm seeing, that is still such a crucial player to have in the backcourt
Yeah,
that
it's
can give
huge.
you 18 to 22. And yes, they still might need to find that second guy to go alongside Cade, but you still keep him around with what we've seen, relying
Yeah.
on those things I spoke about, because he's so dynamic when he's on.
Yeah.
Like, that's a really valuable player to have in the backcourt that can just get defenses. Like, him and Cade are such a contrast that I think when Jaden's more consistent, the team's like scheming against it. It's just really tough.
It reminds me a lot, obviously to a lesser extent, but it reminds me a lot of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery with the Lions. Just like the change of speed, Cade's sort of the Montgomery back, slow, methodical, gets in the post, can match up with smaller guards, and then Jaden Ivey is just lightning quick. And he can get to the rim with ease. And I think, with a few more seasons, assuming the roster keeps filling out and JB keeps doing as good of a job as he's done, like I think, yeah, like you're saying, like the contrast between them, I think on any given possession, like you don't know if you're getting, the lightning or the thunder. Um, and I think, yeah, I think that's a really useful dynamic if they keep progressing as is and the team keeps filling out around them. But yeah, I think we've seen that they can work together, which, wasn't sold on it last season 100%, but that's probably because of Monty Williams.
Speaking of working together, would you extend Jaden Ivey now to be to lock in your backcourt for at least the next season or like 2, 3?
Yeah, for me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I think, well, I've maybe been higher on Ivy, since he was drafted, but like I think his first season when Cade was out, he showed a lot that he can do as the lead guard, and I think that's big too. Just running the second unit like we've seen it this year, and when Cade's out, but obviously we got to get another point guard. Um, but I think, yeah, I extend him, no brainer. I think he's too good and has too much potential to not do that and figure it out later if you have to. I think that's someone you just lock in long term.
I agree. I'm with you. I think what we've seen and the beauty of this season is seeing Kate and Ivy together play
Yes,
well. Like, we've
yes.
had plenty of times this season where they've looked good, because I think last season
Yeah,
that was a huge question. And I'll be honest, like,
yeah,
I was extremely high on Jaden Ivey coming into his second season, and the Monty thing happened, but I thought his last 10 to 15 games last season was a little bit disappointing because he
yeah.
actually didn't come off the bench that much after the first Like after the new year, he was starting a lot, and
Right.
I think he was playing like 30 minutes. It's not to say that didn't ruin his confidence and
Right.
derail his season, but I think he still had plenty of opportunity. And finished last season not as high on him and Cade working together, or at least Jaden panning out in Detroit as such. So
I think that's valid. No, I kind of had the same thing. I was like, but that's kind of when I thought Monty was going to be here for another year or two. I was like, I think Jaden Ivey's going to turn out to be a great player. Last year, I was like, I don't really necessarily believe it's going to be in Detroit, but I'm happy. I think I was wrong.
No, I was the exact same. I was with you. That was the thing. I've always believed in him. I just thought it might not be in Detroit with Cade.
Right.
But last thing on Jaden, what do you see his ceiling as, realistically?
That's a tough question. I think part of that might depend on if, in the next year or so, they go out and get another quote unquote second star. I think, I don't know. That's tough. I think it's like, I think he's progressed nicely. And it's like, if that shot stays consistent and can even bump up a little bit, I mean, Fred Vincent, from what we've seen, has been, great with JI. But I think, 18 a game doesn't seem like the ceiling. I think that's all I can really commit to on ceiling. But like, I think he can be a really good scorer, and especially if he can, put it more together on the defensive end too. But that's kind of the whole Pistons roster. But but yeah, I think if that shot keeps staying where it is and stays consistent, gets a little bit better, even I think, I think sky's the limit scoring wise.
I agree. I love it. Moving on now to Jaden's. How would you say this? They were taken in the same draft.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about two players here because I feel like the second guy's going to come up anyway. But Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about JD first, but I know Stu's going to come up, so I put them in the same conversation here. Just some on-off numbers for these two.
Yeah.
So basically, the Pistons right now are negative 3.7 points per 100 possessions with Jalen Duren on, and they're just a positive 0.1 with Stu. So those numbers have leveled out a bit more than they were after the first 10 games.
Yep.
And I think Jalen Duren this season has genuinely shown improvement as a rim protector solely, but still has many of those issues in not only just effort, but positioning and that kind of thing. I actually haven't got his stats here on the season, but the box score normally looks pretty good for JD.
Yep.
Thoughts on his season so far? And I'm going to be very interested to hear your grade here.
My grade's probably around a C. I think, and I don't know if it's an effort thing versus a just sort of awareness thing, or if it's how much scheme is factored in. But there have been times where it looks absolutely atrocious defensively with him, at the center position. And then you see the contrast when Stu comes in the game and you're like, oh, okay, like we're actually getting stops. Interior defense looks good. But on the flip side of that, like there have been times, look, I think no one has ever questioned Jalen Duren offensively and rebounding wise. Like he's a stud offensively and rebounding. And I think that's why I've seen a lot of people, and I get it, I think give up on him already sort of as the center of the future. Very clear need for improvement, consistency defensively. Consistency is coming up a lot. I mean, it happens with young players. But yeah, I think just there's been too many games. It's sort of like you just don't know what you're getting defensively in effort awareness wise. Part of it could be the Pistons perimeter defense at times hasn't been fantastic, which breaks down the defense, and he just might not be that guy. I mean, he obviously isn't that guy right now, to really anchor that and get it right when the defense collapses. But yeah, a very obvious, clear need for improvement on that end of the ball for him.
Definitely. And just quickly, he's basically giving you 9 points, 9 rebounds, career high 1.3 blocks per game. but he's playing a career low minutes at
Yeah,
24
yeah.
minutes a game.
Mhm.
So I think you outlined it pretty perfectly with Jalen. Like, it's been frustrating.
Yeah.
I think the things that fans are and we find, like, I know are just unforgivable is like that missed box out. Well, I don't know if you even want to call that a missed box out. He just didn't box out against the Knicks the other night.
Right.
In that third quarter, I'm not sure if you caught it, but on a free throw, Knicks get it
Yeah.
back and they scored. Like, that kind of stuff in year 3 at any, like, honestly, in any level of basketball
Yeah,
is
yeah,
pretty crazy. Like,
yeah.
so that's the stuff that's really hard, I think, that I'm finding difficult to get around because you know
Right.
the potential. You see that first quarter he had against the Bucks before foul trouble. You see the game he had against Indiana when they won the other week. Like, that
Yep.
was like the peak version of Jalen Duren to me, like
Yeah.
a glimpse into who he can be. And to not get that level of effort and focus
Right.
is
Yeah,
what's so
focus might
disappointing.
might seem like from the outside looking in the better word. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
And it's tough because on one hand, we've seen some of the defensive stuff show up in seasons prior, but the Pistons haven't been in competitive games like they are this season. So
Right.
it's like this stuff has kind of been here, but now it's just under much more of a lens or a
Yep.
microscope. So it's just kind of it's tough. Um,
Yeah,
I,
no, I agree. Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. I think for me at least, knowing because like you said, like we've seen versions of what we're like, okay, that's it. That's what, that's what JD could be. And we win those games more times than not. Um, I think for me at least, like I'm not jumping ship yet. I understand if people are. But I think having someone like JB who was just in Cleveland with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, best defensive big man duo in the league by far. I think and we've seen it like career low minutes. This is probably the first time in his career that it's not just being given to him.
yeah,
Right, and he's probably getting some tough love and getting some real coaching defensively. Like, he's being held accountable, I think is what I'm trying to say. Potentially for the first time in his career, at this level at least. And I think seeing how he responds to that over, the rest of the season or, I don't wanna say trade deadline. I know some people are ready to make that commitment to the trade deadline. But I think and having Isaiah Stewart, who like I know we'll talk about in a sec, but they they want to see each other succeed. And I feel like Stu understands what his role is, and he wants to see Jade. Like it's not like they're competing for the starting center spot. I feel like, and I feel like have that combination of things where you have JB, you have Stu right behind him who wants him to succeed, who's a better defender, obviously. I think that perfect storm I think, and I hope more than I think, um, can really bring it out of him more consistency because, like you said, we've seen it. We've seen it multiple times this season. Just not enough, way too many head scratcher moments. But I think he's being held accountable with JB, and I think and hope that that's something that will improve sooner rather than later. But on the other hand, it's like there's some things you just can't fully teach. It's just a matter of how much do you want it.
and with that, I think this will take us to Isaiah Stewart. But do you think, in seeing that Duran's basically splitting minutes with Stu now, 24 minutes a night each, do you see a point where JB has to go, okay, we're going to start Stu? Because I think what you said there, Stu's like, I think he's bought into the idea now. He's a backup center and
Yeah.
his goal is to be the best backup center in the league. I
Yeah.
think he's bought into that. Do you see there as being much benefit as benching Duran for Stu?
Um, I don't know. I mean, well, first of all, I also think, and this is a conversation to have, I think Malik should be starting over Tim Hardaway Jr. And I
Yeah.
understand that, you want Malik coming firing off the bench. I digress, but I don't know. I mean, JB hasn't made a single starting lineup change when everyone's healthy yet. So I don't know that that's necessarily coming, but I I don't know. That's a tough question. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Stu has clearly been the better center this year, consistently. And Stu is really impressed. I mean, Stu had a great season last year. But I don't know how much benefit there is to starting Stu versus giving him the same minutes. But the starters have been starting off slow lately. And I know last game was better, but they went through a stretch where they were just getting destroyed in first quarters. And I think if that's something that continues, you sort of have to change something, whether that's THJ or whether it's Duran. So I think it's in that situation, it makes sense if that continues. Otherwise, I don't necessarily need Stu starting if they're playing the same minutes. Yeah, I think that's my long-winded short answer.
No, I agree. And we've kind of spoken about Stu a little bit now, but I think, if you look at his numbers, they probably aren't career highs because of the minutes he's playing. But
Yeah.
I think he's genuinely been a top 2 reason for like 3 or 4 Pistons wins. Like I can think back to that Philadelphia game, first win of the season, like his defense was immense. And he's had many more of those moments. I think recently he's probably hasn't been as impactful, but at the end of the day, he's a backup big. What grade would you give Stu so far?
Stu gets like a B+ from me, maybe an A-. Yeah, mainly limited by the role. I guess in his role, we'll commit to the A-. But Stu has been like seeing him utilized how what we, as Twitter coaches think he should be utilized, like
Twitter coaches.
But like he's been really solid in the role that we all thought he would thrive in. Versus, the last couple seasons, you're trying to shoehorn him in as a starting power forward. So I think it's been really validating to see him thrive in this role, and I think this is something, granted, this is really the first time, I guess, since his rookie year where he's like shoehorned in is like, all right, you're the backup center. You can probably play some 4 sometimes if we have to go big, but yeah, I think he's been really solid. We talked about it earlier in the year. Still less 3-point shooting than we've seen. I thought he made pretty big strides last year. To me, he's been the player that improves the most every year. And he's sort of glue. He's sort of probably the glue in the heart and soul of this team. But I think he's been great in the role, and I do worry that if you move him back to that starting role and start giving him more minutes, I am a little concerned that we sort of revert back to the effectiveness we've seen the last couple of years in that role. Or is the starting big, but yeah, I think as is right now, I think he's been great.
I agree. I don't have much more to add. I think he's excelling in his role. Would like to see him tone back some of the silly fouls.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think you're right. He truly is the glue, and I feel like when he's on the court, he does bring a different energy, which this team
Big
needs.
time. Yeah.
Moving on, I've got the vets here as one group, but I want you to give me a grade for them each individually. So we'll start with the best performing one.
Yeah.
The vibe is been like just an absolute delight to have and to watch. Malik Beasley.
Yeah. A+. Genuine A+. I mean, and people might freak out that I'm giving him a higher grade than Cade. But just in terms of like in his role, like Malik is somebody that I've wanted the Pistons to go after for literal years. Like when he was a restricted free agent with the Timberwolves, I think I've made 3 YouTube videos ever. One of them was why the Pistons need to throw the bag at Malik Beasley. And this is exactly, what I wanted then and what we're seeing now. He's just a bucket. And his defense has turned back up this year compared to the last couple of years with him. Just A+, the vibe, the vet, just like it feels like he's at times kept the group together. Again, this is outside looking in. I don't know anything. But just like watching the team and watching the bench, like he's the guy. Like I need the Pistons to keep him around long term. Even if all he is your 6th, 7th man, but just your bucket getter off the bench. And I mean, he's played in clutch situations. He's been arguably clutchest or second clutchest player on this team this year. And I think, yeah, he's just hits massive shots. When he's hot, he's scorching. And yeah, I'm glad he's here. I think he's the perfect vet for this team.
He is. Especially after last season. Someone to bring in good vibes, good energy.
Yep.
And it helps
And
as
can
well.
play.
Exactly. He's giving you 16
Yeah.
points. He's shooting nearly. Oh, hang on. I thought that was his 3-point percentage. He's shooting 41% from 3 on 9 attempts. Like,
I mean,
how long have we been wanting a true high volume 3-point shooter? They can
not
actually
only
hit
that,
threes once they get here.
I was just about to say that.
We've
Yeah,
had
they can still hit
significant
when they get to
recruiting
Detroit.
victory in Wayne Ellington come in. Like, we've had guys come here, like, for some reason, that Luigi Datomi or something?
Yep,
Like,
yep.
he was, for some reason, on my screen the other night. Don't ask why. But
this is never an issue with that. Him
like,
or like
Malik
Walter
Beasley.
Herman or
Walter, I think that was before my time, but
it's fair.
I know who he is. Yeah, he just feels like they're steadier as well. When then the other team's going on a run, I truly like, I put him ahead of Cade as a guy who's gonna knock down the shot. When the tide's going the other way and you need a 3 to get it back to a 4-point game after you've given up a lead,
you go to Bees.
Easily.
Yeah, especially if he's already hit a couple.
Yeah, and he's had like, he must have had nearly 10, 20-point games this season. No word to lie. He had like 6 in a row at one point.
No, he's just been unbelievable. Like, I don't think you can ask for more, for better from him. Like, he's just been so good. And especially in his role. It's like, I mean, like, you're not bringing him in to be the starting 2, even if you were. I mean, this is, what else can you ask for?
Literally. Like, he's been incredible. Like, and I like how you raised the defense there, because he's going to always probably have some limitations because he's probably a bit undersized to be on the wing.
Yeah,
but his effort, it looks like it's there to me every night. Like,
and that's why I think it's so important, especially as a vet coming in. And also, like, he's only 28 years old.
Yeah.
Like, he's not like an old vet. Like, he's arguably in his prime.
I agree. I don't have much more to add. Like, I think he's a guy you extend, because I think he's really established himself with the organization, and clearly, not that this really matters, but it kind of does. Like, the fan base love him.
Yeah.
So
that's why when that video came out of the one fan, like, that was doesn't represent everybody, Bees. We promise.
Every fan base has those sort of people.
For sure. Like,
it's just unfortunate. Like, that one, they post that on TikTok and actually think.
I know.
Anyway, that's like, I know that was weird, but Bees, like, I feel like he might be. It goes Cade, and then Beasley might be the second most loved. Like,
honestly, yeah. And he's got family ties. I think his mom's from Michigan. I forget where in Michigan. But
no, you're right. His mom, yeah.
Maybe it might be Detroit.
I think it is Detroit. Yeah. Tobias, we'll do these two pretty quickly, but Tobias Harris first. I'm gonna pull up his stats, but just while I'm doing that, just a grade and overall thoughts so far.
Definitely a bit disappointing. Nothing. We talked about this early in the year too. He's been better lately. He definitely has. I would say like 60 to 70% of games, you're getting what you want from him. Just some steady scoring, buckets. Not always when you need them, but buckets. I think if I had to put urgency on a position of upgrade, I know a lot of people would go Duren. But I think upgrading the starting 4 and getting maybe a more athletic, versatile wing could mask some of Duren's issues, and someone maybe a little more consistent offensively. I mean, so that's like, if you're upgrading that, like, you're swinging for an all-star. But yeah, I mean, I think like maybe a B-, C+. He hasn't been bad, but I want more. Like, I want more from him on a nightly basis. But again, he has been better lately. I mean, we knew what he was coming into this year. Like, but I think, I mean, if you have the numbers, like, my eye test tells me the efficiency's dropped off a little bit. I don't know if the numbers track that.
No, you're right. He's pretty much giving you 14 points, 7 rebounds, which is actually good for him.
The
Couple
rebounding's
of
been good.
assists.
Yeah.
But then the field goal percentage is right down compared to pretty much his whole career. He's at 44%, 45%, sorry. And then 3-point is around 34%. So few percentages points low on each there, which, like you said, you want more in that area. If he's not going to give you the 20 points, you at least want him giving you that 14 to 15 efficiently, which he probably hasn't done.
Right. Yeah. And there's been so many wide open corner threes at momentum changing times. Like this has been going on all year now. I mean, I guess only 25 games, but like if he misses every shot going into that, I need some of those wide open, just perfectly executed, potential assisted, just momentum swinging threes that just don't go in. So yeah, I think I still I'm pretty confident just those averages will average out. Like I think he's been trending up lately.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But I do think if there's an immediate want or need for, bringing in another all-star, I think it's at that position.
100%. And I love that you brought that up, because if someone was to ask me the number one position that needs to be filled on this team for the next 5 years or 3 years, front court scoring, 100%.
Yep.
Front court creation and scoring. It's what, like, Tobias can kind of fill that a little bit for the next season or two, but long term, that's the position right there. So I think you're absolutely spot on with that.
But like I said, like he hasn't been bad, but you just want and expect a little bit more, especially the numbers, the efficiency.
I agree. And Tim Hardaway Jr.
Before the injury, he would get an A. After the injury, probably closer to like a C minus, maybe even a D plus. I mean, so this version of THJ is sort of what I feared we were getting with the trade. The pre-injury was a very pleasant surprise. I think he's somewhere in between that. I think he will be the rest of the year. I think he's sort of, for the most part, what you expected. I mean, streaky, can get hot. It hasn't given you much scoring lately, which is a little concerning. But yeah, that's why I think like if there's a starting lineup change, I think it starts there. But we'll see. My guess is JB wants to keep Malik coming off the bench slinging. I think you could have him shooting, getting that volume up with the starters, and maybe just take J.I. off the floor sooner, or Cade, and start that stagger earlier. But I digress. Yeah, I think Tim's been disappointing lately. I think part of that's getting his groove back, obviously thrown off by the injury. Yeah, I would say Malik's been phenomenal. Tobias and THJ have been a little disappointing, but not bad.
And I'm with you on that starting lineup change, because I think what was so good about THJ before the injury was he would often be the guy they would go to for that first three of the game. And it felt like he was hitting a couple of threes in the first quarter every time, which was really gave them momentum. So I think that, and I think THJ can still be the exact same player off the bench. Like, he's a microwave scorer as well.
Agreed. Like maybe he needs that little reset to just like come off the bench in the Beasley role and just chuck him.
I agree. So that would be the center position for me. Like, I get why I was very much about like starting Stu, but now I've kind of gone, well, they're pretty much splitting minutes. Stu's close some games. Like, JB's handling that pretty well, I feel like.
Agreed.
But that I'm with you on that. Moving on, speaking of the coach, JB Bickerstaff.
Yeah.
So I kind of touched on it earlier, but Pistons are 10 and 15 in the play-in hunt, competitive every night except for like 3 games.
Yep.
They're currently ranked 22nd in offense, 15th in defense, 18th in net rating. Overall thoughts on JB so far?
I think for the most part, he's been great. My biggest issue is, and it started with the Chicago game, at least that I noticed it, was whatever the defensive scheme is guarding stretch bigs. And it's tough for me to gauge how much is on him and the scheme and how much is on, Duran and Tobias. But they've just given up so many open threes in the last couple weeks. And it feels like, I don't know if it's an unwillingness or just not adjusting or whatever it is. That's my biggest issue with JB at this point. But But like I love the rotations. I love the staggering of Cade and Ivy and still playing them together a pretty good amount. I love the holding Duren accountable when he just doesn't have it that night. I understand the reluctance to maybe make a starting lineup change to this point. I think, like we talked about, like if the first quarters remain an issue, I think you see one sooner rather than later now that we're at that 25 game mark and everyone's been healthy. I think he's been great. He's just like, it feels like there's a very steady environment. It feels like it's a very encouraging, sort of uplifting environment for the young guys. And that might be why we don't see Duren come off the bench. Because like we talked about, it's like Stu has accepted his role. He gets it. Duren, might see it as a very clear demotion, which obviously would be going, in that role. That might break some confidence there. I wonder if JB keeps going as he is, where it's just like, all right, I'm holding you accountable by playing you less minutes. You still have the starting spot, but like if you want starting minutes, like we got to work on this end of the floor. But yeah, I think he's been great. I mean, just like even like once we signed him, just that intro presser, I was like, I'm all the way. Like when we signed him, I was kind of like, I don't know, like a vet coach. I don't know. And just the moment he started talking at the presser, I was like, oh, I'm in. Like, no more questions. And every time he talks, yeah, like he holds himself accountable, holds everybody accountable. Like I said, just steady.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One thing I've enjoyed is his willingness to, first of all, challenge plays.
Yeah.
But second of all, I feel like he gets 85% of them correct. And when his players request one, he normally backs them in, and it seems to be like I feel like he just wins them 85% of the time.
No,
Truly, I'm not exaggerating.
No, so it's like his willingness to challenge, unreal. Whoever, whether it's him or whoever the assistant coaches are that are making the call, that are watching the footage real quick and be like, do this. This staff has been unreal with challenges. And yeah, like you said, like the willingness to actually do it has been nice.
Absolutely. And I've had really not many issues with Dwayne Casey, like honestly, but I don't think Casey and definitely Monty, I don't think I ever saw those two as fired up as JB was. Like
Monty
he really
definitely.
fights for his Monty definitely does. But even going back to Dwayne Casey, like I can't really remember fully back to the Blake year, 2019, when he had like a real playoff team there. But like JB literally fights for his players. Like he is on the officials so much, and I love it. It's nice. Like it really is.
It's
He's got a
important
couple
too.
of texts, like, and it is important. Yeah.
It's important because, like, I mean, obviously, in part of it's because it's our team and we pay more close attention, but part of it's also just like that's how Detroit sports are officiated. We have never really gotten the best whistle in the league. And so I think it's having a coach that fights for that like definitely draws more attention to it. And
100%.
people just like him. And I feel like that's like officials like him even when he's yelling at them. But I think that's big, and it's definitely encouraging. Like having someone like that as your head coach, and having guys like Malik Beasley on the bench fired up with you and for you, like that's how you really start to cultivate a winning environment.
Absolutely. And last thing on JB, just a grade on his season so far.
I think B plus A minus range. Like I think he's been great. Like I said, like I gave you my one issue. That's something that definitely needs to be fixed. But like overall, like he's been great.
I agree. Moving on, the man who hired JB Biggerstaff, Trajan Langdon, Pistons. Is it president of basketball operations? Sometimes these titles confuse.
Yeah.
I feel like he's
That's
the
what
GM.
it is this time.
He runs the show. So just quickly, I'm just going to go through his moves this summer.
Yep.
So signed Malik Beasley to a 1-year, $6 million deal. Tobias to a $52 million 2-year deal. He traded Quentin Grimes for Tim Hardaway Jr. and 3 second-round picks. Grimes so far with the Mavs is averaging 9 points, 3 boards, couple of assists, pretty much 43% from downtown. But it's important to remember the Pistons would have had to have paid Quentin Grimes. And THJ is an expiring $16 million. He drafted Ron Holland and Bobby Clintman. Traded for Wendell Moore on draft night with a pair of a second-round pick swap with the Wolves. and he signed Paul Reed off the waivers. So I've just hit you with like 7 things there. But what have you? Thoughts on Trajan and how this team's looking since he's taken over?
I mean, I would say, assuming there's more to come sooner rather than later, potentially, another B plus A minus. Only move I didn't like at the time, and I still don't love it, was the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade, but that's a very movable contract. Like you said, they would have had to pay Grimes. There was some stuff floating that Grimes didn't necessarily want to be in Detroit.
Yeah.
And though Grimes is like the prototype, sort of wing you want, sort of 3-and-D. He hasn't been great. He's gotten more opportunity with Dallas's injuries and whatnot, but that's the one move I don't love, or I didn't love. But that's sort of incomplete because we'll see what happens with THJ. And if THJ gets back to pre-injury levels, then the Pistons won that trade, is what it is. The Tobias one is the other one where I liked it at the time. I still like it. I know we've been disappointed with Tobias. That's a contract you need if you're going to swing for a big play. And that's, I think, why they made that move. I think he's built the roster with offense in mind, which I think he probably had to choose one or the other between spacing and defense. I think he probably made the right call, and the next step is upgrading the defensive side of the ball.
I agree. And I think the biggest thing he's done, and you kind of touched on it there with the offense, is he's given these young players, the ones that really matter, a chance, an environment to develop properly and play some real basketball. Like Cade and Ivy both benefited immensely from the spacing.
Huge.
Asar is going to benefit from the spacing when he gets more into a rhythm. Even guys like Ron, I think he just genuinely has given them the opportunity to grow, but also for himself to see what they're like in a functional NBA offense.
Yes.
Because a lot of these young players, you are looking to invest in them for their offensive capabilities.
For sure, yeah. And Asar, who you just mentioned, like, we didn't really touch on him, but like, before the Pistons make any real moves, I think they probably want to see what this team looks like with him back, because that is a big part of your defense.
Definitely. So I'm with you. I think a B plus. The THJ one, I was a bit skeptical of because I really like Quentin Grimes, but I think that those rumors were like kind of true. Didn't want to be here, so you've got that. Like, you don't want any really. This team's got enough bad vibes around it. Like, you only want guys that are here. And I actually feel like THJ went to Michigan. Beasley has his ties. Obviously, Tobias has plenty of ties to Detroit, not just playing here. I think his brother has like housing developments in Detroit. Like, there's a real tie there, and they really want to be there. So I think he's done a pretty good job, and he had a fair bit on his plate.
The man did not sleep for a month at least.
Pretty insane job. So, like you said, so much to play out before we can really grade him. And I think after the Troy Weaver experience, where we're all like, trust in Troy, I was one of those guys.
I know.
A lot of us have learned to kind of just let it play out, but I think it's a really, really solid to good start.
Learn to let it play out, but I'm all in on Trajan. Again, similar to JB, like after his first press conference, I was like, I won't commit again. I'm not gonna let myself get hurt again. I was like, oh, I'm in. Actually, I'm in. But he's given us a lot to feel confidence in so far. Like you said, a lot to play out, but so far so good.
I agree. These two players here, we don't necessarily need to put a grade on them, but Asar Thompson and Ron Holland, just some brief thoughts on them so far. Asar obviously has only played like 5 games, maybe less, but just those two and your thoughts on them.
Yeah, Asar's tough to judge, obviously, but seeing him used as a playmaker is really nice, because that's something that we all, again, Twitter coaches, thought that he was very underutilized under Monty. Just put him in the corner, let him shoot. Not the best way to utilize someone like him. But the shot looks better, I will say, and we'll see with more reps. But I think I'm more encouraged by the way JB is using him, more so than what he's shown in the very limited minutes and very limited stints. I'm very excited to see him sort of ramp back up and and get acclimated again with a full minute allocation. But like, good to see him back on the court for sure. And love the way that he's starting to be utilized.
I agree. And Ron?
Ron, honestly, similar to Summer League, man, where it's like there's definitely things you'll see in the first, chunk of games where you're like, okay, definitely a little out of control, but very impactful defensively can be. I think he's sort of starting to get more under control offensively. I'm very curious to see how many minutes he's playing when Asar is back to his like full minutes. But man, if Ron just hit a free throw in Milwaukee,
You're still thinking about that? I don't blame you for.
no. But I think he's been well. So Trajan made a bunch of moves this summer to bring in offense, knowing he has Asar. Went and drafted Ron Holland, who was very defensive focused. As long as one or both of them can continue to improve their shot. Ron's shot doesn't look bad. It never has to me. Not since he's been at Detroit. It just doesn't go in. But I would I know some people might be like, stop shooting. But like he's been getting a lot of wide open corner looks. Like I think especially in this season, I think it's important that he keeps shooting that. And I think that'll start going in because again, to my untrained eye, like the shot looks pretty good. Yeah, I think he's been more under control. I think he'll continue to get better. I think by the end of the year, we're going to feel pretty good about him going into next year.
I agree. And I think he's the ultimate, like, no, yes player. Like,
100%.
He does some really amazing things and then some things you're like, oh, Ron.
Right.
Come on, man.
Which is very, I feel like, common for sort of like a more raw athletic rookie prospect.
And I think it's just switch it, definitely. And I'm so glad he's come to this team this season. Yes. I would be very concerned for Ron's development if he came last season or the season before, where he would probably be getting 20 to 28 minutes a game and he needs this more controlled environment, I think, for his development. And I think you're seeing him, I don't really look at the box score too much with him, but I feel like he actually genuinely makes impactful plays towards winning.
100%.
Like he does. And he makes some ones that contribute the other way. But for a rookie, that's encouraging. And at the end of the day, he's a 6'7", pretty athletic wing that those guys are worth investing time into. And it's why I'm still fine with the pick at 5.
Yeah, no, and I fully agree with you where it's like the game I feel like will slow down for him and the processing will get quicker. Maybe not playing 25, 30 minutes a night, but, playing the 10 or 15. I don't know what he's getting this year, but definitely not too many minutes. And I think that's big. You hit it on the nose.
I love it. All right, we're going to close it out here with the final topic of the show. So I've set up a few options here. So what direction will the Pistons go this season? Option A, push for the play-in and develop the current core with big decisions to come in the offseason. Option B, push for the playoffs, make a win-now trade around the deadline. That's obviously a Brandon Ingram, Zach LaVine, or some player we aren't aware of yet. Option C is sell on a vet, say THJ and maybe Stu for draft capital and try, and you probably kind of tank the season a little bit and look to go to the draft, or other.
I think a combination of B and C.
Okay.
Here, I remember talking about this. It might have been after like the 6th or 7th game of the year where I'm like, on your show, where it's like, if they keep winning like this, I think you kind of have to make a move to win now. I tweeted this the other day too. Definitely not a move where you're like getting rid of your young players and draft capital for like a Zach LaVine or just like a vet who's going to give you a couple years and like it's definitely going to help you right now. Maybe get maybe 6, 7, 8 seed sort of thing. I'm not saying go do that, but I think like we talked about, like there's some very clear holes on the roster. You can conceivably pretty easily upgrade the starting 3 spot this year. Upgrading that starting 4 Tobias spot is where you're really taking a swing. But I think something to keep in mind too, the Pistons have the most cap space right now in the league. I mean, they have like 10 million, I think, around.
Yep.
A lot of teams are in that apron zone. And,
Yep.
with the Jimmy Butler rumors, and we're going to start heating up as December 15th comes up. But the Pistons, in my opinion, you can either, eat some salary and get draft pick, as we're all tired of talking about, but sometimes that's the right move. But you could do that while also selling an expiring THJ and taking back some longer term money, maybe at that salary. I think there's ways they can do that where it helps you right now and you still can get assets. I mean, sort of like a THJ move, where like, the best version of THJ helps you right now, and you got 3 second-round picks out of it. So something like that, I think if they keep winning at this pace or better over the next couple weeks, I think you take a swing. Whether it's to go grab and whether it's to move Duran, whether it's to move Tobias and a first-round pick for like, I don't know who the right name is. I'm a little off the Brandon Ingram train just because of how much financially he will cost and, what I think he really adds to this team. I think he's a great player. He would obviously help, but I think just thinking of the value cost there, I'm a little out. Maybe it's going to get Zach LaVine for free. I'm all in on that move. I have been for a while. I think if you can get him without really giving up anything of value, just like filler, you do it. Even though that financial commitment's big, I think it's only like 2 more years. Yeah, I think there's a combination of B and C there where you have these vet contracts, which I think are meant to be moved, but also there's some things you can upgrade, and how good they've looked right now with those very clear holes. I think it's worth taking a swing right now. And again, you're not mortgaging the future for, another Blake Griffin move, or like I said, even like giving up a bunch for Zach LaVine or something like that, who's only going to help you for a couple of years. But I think there's opportunity here, especially with all the financial implications around the league.
I agree. And that's why, I'll credit Koo for this, obviously, of Locked On Pistons. Cade's in year 4. Now, he's signed an extension. He's here for a while, but he's going to be going into year 5 next season. I know we're still early in year 4, but it is around the time where you don't want to be a bottom 4 team in the East. And I know the Pistons are just above that, but that's why I'm now leaning more towards I would be okay if they traded for Brandon Ingram or Zach LaVine. I really would, because as long as you're keeping Jaden Ivey, I think you want to keep Ivey and Asar. So maybe I'm being a bit unreal. I think you're keeping Asar in a LaVine or Ingram deal just based on their contract situations and what the teams, how they're so. But I'm fine with, honestly, anyone else for those 2 guys. Not all of them, but I think the deal I've seen for LaVine is Stu, THJ, and maybe a second, or maybe it was Marcus Sasser. It would kill me to see Stu go. He's not a favorite player. But at the end of the day, no one cares. He's my favorite player in terms of basketball.
We'll see.
What's got me excited is I think Zach LaVine, having a shot maker like that,
totally
truly would take Cade's game to another level. Yes, the ball might be out of his hands a little bit more, but he's probably going to be more efficient, because teams that cannot load up on Cade when Zach LaVine's there, because they still kind of can when Ivy is, because Ivy just, he's inconsistent and hasn't proven it yet. When Zach LaVine's there, you're not leaving him alone. You're just not. You're not loading up on Cade. So
no, I do. I agree with you there.
That have kind of made me change my mind a little bit about this, because I think it can really elevate Cade's game, and Jaden Ivey as well.
Yeah, I agree. That's something I don't think I would give up Stu for LaVine, because just thinking of Stu is a very valuable player league-wide. Every single team wants an Isaiah Stewart.
Yeah.
Very clearly, every team doesn't want Zach LaVine, especially in his current contract situation. So it's I think while we want him, we personally want him, I think you still have so much leverage where you don't need to give off one of your most valuable pieces. Whether he's here, whether Stu is here long-term or not, he can get you something pretty valuable in return, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would give up an Isaiah Stewart for Zach LaVine, given that it seems like no one wants LaVine in his contract. That's why I'm like, I would take that money if you don't have to really give up any of your young pieces. You know, as much as I like Marcus Sasser, like he's someone like, okay, if that's what we have to do, plus some salary filler, that's what we have to do.
Can I ask you this? Because my guy, Kyle Metz, cap guy, I'm going to have him on here in a minute to do some fake trades because he's just knows all this stuff.
Yeah.
He's been saying to me it's pretty much impossible to do a LaVine trade. You are like the reason Stu's in it because of the salary, but if you don't have Stu, you pretty much have to have Tobias because LaVine's at 43 million, and then you pretty much have
Tobias, THJ.
Yeah, those three. That's the reason Stu's in there, or else. So would you do Tobias and whatever else it takes money wise for LaVine?
I think I would. It's definitely a gamble. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
but essentially next season, right? Isn't it this season and next season is LaVine, or is there one more after that?
I've got his deal here. So this season at 43 million, then he has 2 more years after that at around 45. The second one is a player option. So you've got him for he's going to pick that up. So you have two
for sure.
Yeah. So
he should.
If you get him during the season, you've got him for 2.5.
Okay. I mean, that contract becomes obviously more tradable every single year. There's a chance you're stuck with him next year. Like if it goes south, you're stuck with it. You lost the trade. But how much like Tobias, the idea of Tobias is great. You can probably get that value hopefully within a SAR, right? I mean, maybe not as much offensively, but the defense and offense sort of balances out for the entire Tobias value. And then after next year, it's an expiring deal. That's when, any teams that are like, I'm done with this apron situation, like we're just blowing it up, like let's get the books clean next year. You're in a good spot to, move LaVine there. I think I would do it in that situation if it lets you keep everybody else, because I think Tobias's production is replaceable. And in my opinion, Tobias is a very clear stopgap, potentially with a good contract to move this year or next year.
Yeah.
So I would do that if you could keep them. I'm probably higher on LaVine than a lot of people. I get it. The contract's atrocious, but that's how a team like the Pistons get a player like Zach LaVine.
Exactly. So that's the thing. Like these are tough conversations. Like we're just fans and we're struggling. Like imagine being the GM. Like so
I
it's
know.
like it's just interesting because like I want to keep Stu, but it's like his contract. But I'm with you. Like I feel like you would rather give up Tobias, but it's just tough. Just the way it works. So
yeah, I also don't necessarily think that, and I don't have a list in front of me right now, but I don't think LaVine and Ingram are the only options that'll be available before the deadline, basically. So I think it's okay to be patient, but I think even if you're not swinging for a LaVine or an Ingram or a player of that caliber, like I think upgrading your role players is pretty necessary this year in those spots we talked about. And we didn't talk about it, but like if you're ready to give up on the Duren experiment, Nikola Vucevic for a couple seconds or a low cost. I know his money's a little high too, and you're gonna have to make that work as well. But
I think he signed 3 years, 60 million in the off season, so it's not like it's.
That's actually not bad. Yeah.
Yeah, you can make that.
Having a stretch 5, being able to go 5 out for the most part, and throw a SAR in there at the 3 or the 4.
And you know what?
You need a center, who can stretch the floor.
Long-term solution, but when you talk about front court scoring, like, yes, he's not going to necessarily break you down off the dribble, but he can put his back to the basket. Like we saw him torch us, the Pistons, a few weeks ago.
Every time.
Every time. So, I think that's going to do it for today's show, Jordan. Thank you so much for joining. Tell the people where they can find you, what you got happening.
Just Twitter and Blue Sky now at Pistons Thoughts, just in case. But that's pretty much it, man. Appreciate you having me. Always fun to talk.
Of course, man. Well, thank you so much again. Is it around 8 o'clock where you are, I assume?
Yep.
Beautiful, my friend. I love that you're on the West Coast as well, because it means I can start these a bit later here.
I got you.
This time worked perfectly. We're definitely going to have you back on for sure.
For sure, man.
So thank you so much for joining.
Of course.
Thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and drop a comment below.